The following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
Welcome to the System is Down.
All right. Prepare your panties for a good wadding, because this episode just might push some buttons, ruffle some feathers, rustle some jimmies, and hopefully make you think about some new ideas. What's up, Downers? Welcome back to another glorious episode of The System is Down, and as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in every single Monday for your weekly dose of discomfort. If you're like Rodger Paxton and this is your first time listening to the show, then welcome, and go hug the person that brought you here, because this show's going to be a fun one. The System is Down is a place where we talk about all things uncomfortable, namely, but not limited to, conspiracies, politics, and religion. You know, all those things that you probably got into trouble for bringing up at your family's Easter get-togethers yesterday. Now, as I mentioned in last week's episode, we did a drawing for a free giveaway of Star Wars The Last Jedi on DVD. A bunch of people signed up, and thank you guys so much for that, but there can only be one winner. I'll be announcing the winner at the end of this episode, so stick around after to see if you won. Anyway, today's episode is a fun one. Like I said, it's a conversation that I personally really enjoyed. If you're a regular listener, you are likely aware that when it comes to politics, I personally lean pretty hard in the libertarian direction, and I've had several libertarians on the show, the Lions of Liberty guys, like Mark Clare, Brian McWilliams, John Odermatt, those guys. Also, Remzo Martinez and Trey Weaver have been on the show, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to extreme anarcho-capitalism, voluntarism, and just straight-up no government, all freedom, anarchy side of libertarianism, there's just nobody that paints the picture better or clearer than Rodger freaking Paxton. It was a fantastic conversation, and we dug pretty deep into the meaning of anarchy and how a fully anarchist society would function. So let's get into it. All that said, and without further ado, let's get weird. My guest today is producer, marketer, coordinator of the Libertarian Festival Porkfest, podcast host, creator of the Liberty Podcast Network, Pax Libertas Productions, which includes, but is not limited to, Free Coast Freecast, the Lava Flow Podcast, the ANCAP Barbershop, Resist the Empire, One Free Family, and Anarcho-Christian, and just all-around fascinating individual, Rodger freaking Paxton. Rodger, how's it going, man?
Man, it's doing great. Good to be here. You did really well with that, but a Free Coast Freecast has dropped off. But other than that, yeah.
Okay,
fantastic.
Well, I looked at the website, and you still have it on there, so I included it.
Oh, do I? Holy shit, I guess I got to get my web guy to fix that. Oops.
Yeah, it's all good. Rodger, this is the first time you and I have actually officially spoke, but I feel like we know each other because we've done some, back and forth in the forums between between the System is Down one and Lions of Liberty and all that. So we run in some of the same circles. And so this is going to be, we're drinking, we're going to have a good time. We're going to talk about some uncomfortable stuff that will push some people's buttons. But
that's what I do.
Absolutely. It might be a little bit more of a laid-back conversation than most, but we'll get the fire going.
Absolutely.
So, Rodger, let me start by asking, at the risk of sounding like a douchebag, Rodger, what's your favorite episode of this show?
Oh, that's a trick question. So as Dan knows full well, I have yet to listen to an episode, but I can definitively say that my favorite episode of The System is Down is this one right here. But honestly, I just haven't had a chance. I've got so much in my my podcatcher that it's hard to make room for something else. As a matter of fact, I've been having to remove shit.
Right.
And but yours is on the list. It will eventually be in my podcatcher, I promise.
I hear you, man. I've listened to a handful of yours. I've listened to some episodes of The Lava Flow. I've listened to Resist the Empire. Both absolutely fantastic shows, absolutely. But I don't have time to keep up with every single podcast in my catcher, let alone with all the tons of shit that I just read off that you do, and I do way less. So.
Mark Clare recommends your show, and Mark Clare's a good personal friend. So, sure. That's why I've got to have your show on my feed at some point, because if he recommends it, I give it all of its gold. It's got to be gold.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the fake compliments that are based off of nothing but hearsay.
Well, whatever. Hearsay, whatever.
I'm kidding. Well, let's get into the topic. I wanted to have you on because you, Rodger, are a self-proclaimed straight-up anarchist, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's not a term that I usually lead off with just because
Sure.
it has such a connotation. Actually, John Odermatt and I talked about that in the last Libertarians in Living Rooms Drinking Liquor on Lions of
Right.
Liberty, because it does have a negative connotation. Now, for better or for worse, people see anarchist as these black-clad, rock throwing and Molotov cocktail throwing, and destroying property. That's not an anarchist.
Before
That's
you get into it, my second question is, how
sure.
many towns have you burned down? How many buildings have you tagged? How many Molotov cocktails do you have on your person? How many ski masks do you own? And lastly, when was the last time you shopped at Hot Topic?
I have not shopped at Hot Topic since I was a kid. I do own ski masks because we live in New Hampshire, and there's a lot of shit going on here as far as snow and whatnot. And when I'm out there snow blowing, I do put on a ski mask. No Molotov cocktails, but I do have the materials to make them. Does that count?
Terrorist.
And I've never burned down any cities. However, the town of Milton that I live in Milton, New Hampshire, has on the ballot tomorrow for the town vote a vote to dissolve the city. The city could possibly be dissolved because of the efforts of a Free State Project anarchist by the name of Glenn Begley, a good friend of mine.
But by dissolve the city, do you mean just the government of the city?
Yeah, the city government would be dissolved completely. All of the assets would either be given to the county or sold off to pay debts. And then we would have no city government. We would still be under the county charter, but in New Hampshire, the counties have almost no power at all. So, I'm not a voter. But I considered going to vote for that until we found out we had a snowstorm coming in tomorrow. And I was like, no,
not worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I cut you off there when you were starting to define anarchy, what people perceive it as and what it actually is. So please continue.
So, most people do see it as that black-clad, person that destroys Starbucks and hates capitalism. That's not an anarchist. That's an authoritarian. That's somebody who wants to tell you how to live your fucking life. And they will use violence and force to do it. That's not anarchy. Anarchy is simply without rulers. It means nobody rules your life. Not some black-clad thug with a Molotov cocktail, not the president of the United States, not the boss of your company. Nobody rules you except yourself. That's all it means. It's that simple. So I prefer the term voluntarism, and that's a term that goes back centuries, back to the 1500s, because that's basically what it means. It means voluntary interaction between people without anybody having power over the other person. So voluntarism is where it's at. And actually, if you look at voluntarist.com, there's a wealth of information on that website. And I actually started a podcast called Essential Libertarianism based on the content on that website that basically takes the content they've been writing for 4 decades now and puts it in a podcast format so you can listen to it on the go.
Well, shit, I missed one in my list of 25 things. I still missed one.
Yeah, that one's at essentiallibertarianism.com. And that's one of my favorites to do because it's such a wealth of information. And it's not my content. It's other people's content.
Sure. Very cool. Yeah. So what got you started down this rebellious quote unquote path? Were you born into a family of people who think this way, or did you come to this conclusion on your own?
So I was born into a family with a conservative Democrat father and a hardcore religious conservative mother. My father was only a Democrat because he was in the unions, local 669 pipefitter union. So he had to vote Democrat because the unions were protected by the Democrats, but he was pretty much a conservative. Whereas my mother was a hardcore religious conservative, got me in the church, basically, led me to being a preacher. Now I'm an atheist many years later.
We're going to get into that for sure. You mentioned that on the latest Lions of Liberty podcast, and I was like, holy shit, we got to talk about that for sure.
So it wasn't anything from my upbringing other than my mother taught me to believe in liberty. But at the time, I defined liberty based on her definition, that it was liberty for me, but not for you. I should have all the rights that I want, but gays shouldn't be married. People should not be able to have abortions or, whatever the case may be. Abortions are obviously a touchy topic that everybody has differences on. But she only wanted liberty for her. And when I started realizing how contradictory that was and how hypocritical that was, I started looking at people like Ron Paul. I first started looking at Ron Paul in 1994, 95-ish, kind of early to that bandwagon, but I still wasn't libertarian until I found Ayn Rand. I read her books and the logic behind her books. I've always considered myself a logical person, and if I can't refute your logic, if you can't beat them, join them. So I couldn't refute her logic. That's simple.
Nice. So that's what got you to libertarianism. Did you like just keep digging to the point where you're like, all of it can be gone?
Well, and I was an anarchist for a long time, even after, of course, Ayn Rand would never have called herself an anarchist, even though her position probably led to as many anarchists as Ron Paul or anybody else. But anarchy took longer. They say normally it's 6 months from anarchy to anarchism, but it was more like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years for me. Murray Rothbard was a huge help in that for a new liberty. The Libertarian Manifesto was a big part of it. And some friends who I had who were libertarian anarchists, Kathleen Wickstrom, a very good friend of mine, who also moved from Arkansas to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, and other people like her who would, use the Socratic method and ask me questions that I couldn't answer, questions that I couldn't refute. It's like, well, again, if I can't beat them, so now I'm an anarchist.
Right. So is there an end point to this? Is there a place that government actually has, or?
So I fully believe, as Ark and Rose does, that government is the most dangerous superstition. And it's a superstition like any other superstition, whether it's, whether it's Egyptian gods or whether it's the Christian God or whatever the case may be. It's all superstition. And if we stop believing in it, it goes away. And, I got some shit from Mark and John and Howie on Lions of Liberty about that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't articulate myself, I guess, as well as I should have on that. I don't believe that if I personally, one person, stops believing in government, it goes away. But when 50, 60, 70, 80% of people stop believing in government, stop contributing, stop legitimizing the theft, the murder, the assaults that they're doing to us on a regular basis, when we stop believing in that, then they lose all their power. And when they lose their power, they go away.
Sure. Yeah, and our listenership is a little different than yours. Like, we don't have straight up... We don't have just libertarian base. We have people all over the spectrum. We talk about all kinds of things. So explain what you mean by theft and murder and all that in the government.
Well, of course, taxation is theft, period. I would actually, on my episode that's coming out tomorrow, I talked about a news article where the government lost $2.2 million per minute last year. Per minute. They lost $2.2 million. That is theft, too. They stole that money from us, and they lose it and piss it away because it's not their money. They don't care.
What other job can you lose $2.2 million and still keep your job?
That's exactly right. Much less $2.2 million per minute. Right. But then, when you have murder, you have the bombings of brown people all over the world. You have, the killings of people in our own country by police officers, death penalty cases. We know for a fact that there have been people undeniably who have been killed by the death penalty in this country who were innocent. That's murder, period. Mm-hmm. No other way to look at it.
Yeah, and this might seem like a rudimentary question to a lot of libertarian-minded people, but the whole taxation is theft thing I've brought up in the forum really early on in the forum, and some people didn't really understand what that means. Can you get into that a little bit? Absolutely. So one of the memes that I post quite a bit is that slavery before 1860 was 100% of your labor, of certain people's labor being stolen by the government or by people as slaves. What percentage does it stop being slavery? Because I'm paying 40% of my of my money to taxes right now. Am I a 40% slave? Are you a 30% slave? Are you a 20% slave? Or are you a Bill Gates and a 50% slave? And we're all slaves, period. They are stealing our money because I didn't consent. I never signed a document saying, hey, I am willingly giving you this money. They are taking it by force. And if I refuse to pay it, then they will send me a bunch of letters saying, hey, you're going to pay it. If I still don't pay it, then they'll garnish my wages. If I stop working, then they'll send men with guns to my house and kidnap me and take me away and put me in a fucking cage. And then then I'm really a slave at that point. Taxation is theft. Absolutely. Preach, brother, preach. No, just kidding. We'll get to the preaching stuff later.
Right.
So would you say that, I mean, you spoke to war and that type of thing. Would you say that you're a pacifist as well?
No, definitely not. I am I certainly believe in self-defense. I own many weapons. As a matter of fact, 99% of the time I'm armed or have a weapon within arm's reach of me. Usually when I'm in the shower is about the only time that I'm not.
What do you have on you right now?
It's actually a Colt 1991 model, compact.
Nice.
And that's my baby. I bought that the day that I turned 21. That's my baby.
Nice.
But and that was 21 years ago. I'm 42 now. Holy cow. But anyway, so I've owned that gun half my life. But I've got AR-15, so I've got an AK-47, I've got an SKS. I have weapons around, and that's never going to stop. My job as a human being, is to protect my life. And my job as a parent is to protect my children's lives. My wife carries everywhere she goes. She has a Springfield XDM 40 that she carries everywhere she goes, because when I'm not around, it's her job to protect herself and my kids.
Right.
So we are not pacifists by any means. We definitely believe in protecting what's ours, but the initiation of violence is where I draw the line. You know, I cannot consciously harm another human being without first being attacked or threatened or in some way initiated aggression against.
Just self-defense.
Exactly.
Do you believe in the government as far as self-defense, military defense?
Well, okay. I do believe that in a non-government society, an anarchist society, for lack of a better term, there could absolutely be applications for military and police, and there would be. I mean, we would not be a society of no laws. We would be a society of no rulers. There would still be laws. You still wouldn't be able to murder, because now you're harming someone. You're committing aggression against someone. Common law has existed for centuries, and that would still exist. Military would probably exist as a form of insurance. So you would pay, I pay Hanover Insurance, for example, to insure my home. And thank God I did, because I had a flood that cost me $10,000 last week. Now they're compensating me for that. In the same vein, if a warring party, a warlord, or a foreign state or whatever wanted to come over here and destroy my home, well, I've got insurance to protect me against that. Insurance companies would either employ or they would start their own militaries. They would have weapons of war to protect the assets that they've insured. Of course they would. There's no question that they would. Companies would do the same thing. Companies don't want to lose their customers, so they don't want their cities to be bombed. So companies would put in lots of money for that sort of thing. And if our money is not stolen from us at 40% or 50% of our income and wasted at $2.2 million per minute, then we have so much more resources, so much more money to actually use effectively for that sort of thing.
So you're talking about privatized military just for
Absolutely.
specific communities.
Or even specific regions. I mean, I can't imagine that regions couldn't get together and do the same sort of thing.
People, individuals, can they hire a group of bodyguards? I mean,
well, sure. If I'm Bill Gates, for example, and I want to have armed, military SWAT team or military, the Navy SEALs, if I want to have Navy SEALs around me 24/7, sure. If I've got the money to pay for it. And the thing is, we would all have so much more money and so much more wealth at our disposal without government wasting so much of it. We'd be able to afford these things easily.
Sure. If I'm understanding correctly, you're saying zero national defense, zero national government, none of that.
Well, there would be no national. That's part of the thing is, where do you live?
Illinois.
Okay. So Illinois is so different than New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is so different than Arkansas. Why are we all in the same country? I mean,
right.
There's no reason for that. To have this huge conglomerate body of, land mass under one organization is just, well, it's ridiculous. It can't be controlled, as we see. I mean, we see all the time things going on that shouldn't be, and the government can't do anything to stop it. Mm-hmm. That's the issue that we've got, is that government, most people who are in government they don't want to hurt people. They don't want to, they don't have bad intentions. But the problem is, when they get there, their intentions don't matter, because it's already happening. So they're just part of the train at that point. And that's why I'm against running for office. For example, I had that argument today with some friends. Darryl W. Perry asking if I'm going to run for office in New Hampshire. No, I'm done with that shit, because I'm not going to perpetuate the violence. I'm not going to legitimize the system anymore.
Sure.
But my answer to your question is secede. I'm a regional captain for the New Hampshire New Hampshire for Independence, which is an organization that is trying to get the state of New Hampshire to secede from the United States.
Sure. Nice. I've talked to my wife about your whole deal up there, and I would love to jump ship, but hard stuff, family and jobs and all that.
It was one of the hardest decisions I ever made, but let me tell you, my only regret is I didn't do it years before.
Sure.
I lived in Arkansas for 40 years. I have family there. I have, my parents are there, my best friends there. But moving up here was the best thing that I ever did for my family.
She hates the cold too, so.
Well, but you live in Illinois. You got cold, so you're going.
I know. She wants to move south.
Right. Well, I went from the deep south, New Hampshire. Didn't know what snow was,
right.
And I get up here, and it's funny because I've kind of gotten used to the cold already. Believe it or not. After we've been here 2.5 years now. We're actually having another big snowstorm tomorrow. Yay. So we had just had one last Thursday. So, but
Sure.
kind of gotten used to it.
Sure.
The fires of liberty keep you warm.
Good sales pitch. Now, you basically already answered my next question, which was, if states have, communities that have militias and people and little organizations have militias, does it matter at all, like that we are working together for a collective country or bigger community? Does the United States matter? Would you have the whole country dissolved?
I would absolutely have the whole country dissolved. I mean, I believe that voluntary enclaves of people, whether it's a communal system under communism in a small enclave or whether it's voluntarism, these things would pop up. And the great thing about those experiments is almost like you have with the states, because you have 50 little experiments going on. But frankly, all of these experiments are basically the same because they're all under the same federal government. You may have a little bit of differences here and there, but for the most part, they're all pretty much the same. You would have hundreds or thousands of these enclaves of people trying different systems. You would have libertarian communities. You would have minarchist communities, anarchists, communists, socialists, whatever. And people would see within a few years of what's actually working, what's actually making a difference, and what's making people more wealthy, more healthy, and more free. And then you would see those things start to grow. But it would all be voluntary. As far as I'm concerned, any enclave that would keep me involuntarily or require me to do, pay taxes or do certain duties or whatever the case may be, to live in their community is not one that I would be involved in.
Sure. So we're talking basically modernized tribes. I mean,
essentially,
what we're saying?
So Ireland, depending on what history books you look at, anywhere from 1,000 to 9,000 years, Ireland lived under anarchy, complete and total anarchy. It was a tribalist system, and they not only succeeded, but they flourished under that system. Now, of course, there were some warring tribes and whatnot, but they dealt with that locally, and then it was taken care of. But for anywhere from 1,000 to 9,000 years, and looking at that history that happened in Ireland. I mean, look at Ireland today. It's a very modern society, and a lot of that is due to the lessons that they've learned through their anarchist system. And that's why Ireland is way above the U.S. on the Freedom Scale Index. That came out just a couple of days ago, and I think Ireland is in the top 5. I was thinking they were number 3, and U.S. was like 17 or 18. Ireland is kicking our ass in freedom.
Yeah, so you would say we are not the freest, best nation in the world. We're not the freest country.
No, we're definitely not. And
heresy.
It's a damn shame. I mean, it really is, because I am an American for better or for worse, and I want to be the best at everything that I can be. And that's why I think breaking up the United States is the best thing for all of us.
Sure. Now, what happens in the case that, let's say hypothetically, in this anarchy utopia that is the former United States, all the states are broken up from each other, or even smaller, probably most likely much smaller, into different tribes. If people in, say, look at North America before we came here. Somebody came and they had bigger force, and because the Native Americans weren't working together, they were wiped out. Is that a concern in this utopia idea?
So yes, of course it is. I mean, warlordism, or whatever you want to call it. Actually, Bob Murphy, wrote a pamphlet called Chaos Theory, and it's free on the internet. Just search Bob Murphy Chaos Theory. It is one of the best it's like 40 or 50 pages, short pamphlet about how warlords would be handled in an anarchist society. And it goes back to that insurance scheme. Because insurance companies, they're insuring my land, they don't want to see that destroyed because they're going to have to pay out mega bucks to restore it. So they will come up with some form of defense to help protect that. And of course, I would be paying that in my insurance premiums, of course. But I would have so much more money in my pocket because the government isn't stealing money from me that I can do that. And so, yes, you would surely have, whether it's a foreign nation who is jealous because we're prospering over here in anarchy, and they may want to try to attack. Kim Jong-un may still have his panties in a fucking wad. They may want to try to drop a nuke on us. But hell, by then, the government can't create a way to stop a nuke, but damn it, I guarantee you capitalism can. No question about it.
Gotcha. Now, how does capitalism work in an anarchist society? Because, people equate anarchy, as we said, with chaos. So
I use the term capitalism. It's a term I try not to use because if you look at the definition of capitalism in the Webster Dictionary, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, it actually, the way it's defined, it does also include crony capitalism. And I hate crony capitalism. So I try not to use that word. I tend to try to use free market, but I'm still trying to train my brain to use free market instead. So free market is voluntarism, like we talked about. It is the voluntary transaction between me and you. You know, I want to buy that cool flag on your wall. I'm going to give you $20 for it. You think that's a hell of a deal for it, so you're going to give me your flag for the $20. Problem solved. But
yeah, I only paid $7 for it. If you want it, you can have it.
There you go. So you're making a deal, and then now that you've got the $20, you find out that it's fake money or whatever. You find out that I've defrauded you. So now I still owe you $20. So, you know, through a non-government, independent, voluntarist court system, again, go to Bob Murphy's chaos theory. He talks about police and courts in that theory as well. I mean, in that pamphlet as well. Through those intermediary court systems, then, you know, you can find a way to get that money back from you, period. Because I've committed fraud against you. We don't need a government for people to be able to know that I've committed fraud against you by giving you a fake $20 bill.
Sure.
We don't need a government for that.
Well, how does pardon my feeble mind, but how does how does like the court system work if we have a bunch of different tribes with a bunch of different mini governments and a bunch of different law systems? If some other tribe says, you know, it's okay to steal, of course that won't happen, but, you know, going to extremes here, if you bought something from them, is that just your problem because you didn't, you know, look into it? So
if a tribe has that mentality that they're okay with stealing, then most other tribes around them would completely shun them and they would be on their own. But let's say it's a tribe that is okay with stealing, but they're not vocal about it. So let's say that, you know, that you're in tribe A and I'm in tribe B. You come over to my tribe, you bring me this flag, and this flag is just, it's old and it's torn, but it's in a package and I can't see it until after you're gone. So you've now cheated me. I've given you $20. You've walked away with my good hard-earned money, and you've given me a piece of shit flag. So your tribe or your insurance company or, you know, whatever, your police force, whatever you have at your mercy, they will have a court system wrapped around them. Mine will have the same. So now we have competing court systems. If it's a true private arbitration system that has a court system that actually cares about fairness, then they will both probably rule the same way. But if they don't, then there will be a higher court system that both of these parties will agree to that will make the final judgment. Now, a court system like that is only going to want to present justice, because if they don't, if they get a reputation for giving unfair judgments, then they are not going to be used and they're not going to be paid for their services. So it's no different than I go to, say, Walmart. I shop at Walmart because they give me good quality products for a good price. Well, if they give me shitty products for a crazy price, I'm not going to Walmart. It's no different with the judicial system in the free market, because if they're giving unfair rulings, if they're, if they're favoring one side over another in an unfair way, then that's going to be out there and everybody's going to know it. Nobody's going to use their services.
Sure. So this higher court system, what is the point where that becomes a government? I mean, what is their incentive to be the tiebreaker in this?
To make money, because both of those arbitration companies now have to pay the higher arbitration company for their services. It's for profit and it's completely voluntary. So if let's say that side A and side B can't agree on who they choose for an arbitration company, well, now we're in deadlock. But now we know that we have an issue there that hasn't been resolved. So people will have to then decide, okay, do I shun Dan because he, here's the facts of the case. Do I shun Dan because he fucked Rodger out of his $20 by giving him ripped up, torn up flag? Or do I shun Rodger because, whatever, Rodger has a fucked up beard, whatever the case may be.
It's a glorious beard.
Right. So, you will see people, make those decisions. And is it going to be perfect? Of course not. But look at our system. It's far from perfect. It's a fucking disaster right now. You have people going to jail for smoking a fucking plant right now. You would never have that in a free market society, ever. It wouldn't be possible. It would be unfathomable.
Sure. So my roads, Rodger. How do we get from tribe A to tribe B? And does it matter?
It doesn't matter because, of course, tribe A wants to trade with tribe B, because if we kept it all locally, then that would limit our wealth, of course. So, and that's why, trading with Japan and China is so important. And that's why these steel tariffs by Trump is a fucking disaster. It's going to cost American jobs. It's going to cost, when Bush did this in 2000 and, God, what was it, 2006, I think, he put a 30% tariff on steel, and it cost 200,000 manufacturing jobs in this country because everything went up in cost. Automobiles, homes, appliances, everything that you steal went up in cost. So we lost hundreds of thousands of jobs because of it. Same thing's going to happen here. Instead of protecting American steelworkers, we need to protect American consumers, because all a tariff is, it's a theft of resources from American consumers to American producers. So they're stealing money from you and me to pad the pockets of American producers. And that is despicable. And I forgot your question.
My roads, Rodger. My roads.
Right. So, of course, we would want a road between A and B, of course, because I want to trade with you. Even if you sell me a shitty flag every once in a while, I still want to trade with you. So, because of that, people would build roads. I mean, who builds the roads today? The government doesn't build roads. Now, they may try to repair them, but they do a shitty job.
Right.
But individuals build roads. Road builders build roads, and road builders, even though they may get paid from the government, they don't work for the government. They work for themselves. So you and me, we would pay road builders to build a road. If I've got a big company in tribe A and I want customers from tribe B, then I'm going to pay some money to build some of that road. And I'm going to get with many other businesses in tribe A to help finish building that road. And consumers in tribe B who want those products and services of tribe A, they may pitch in too. It's that simple. It's really not hard. We don't need a middleman to buy clothes. Why do we need a middleman to buy roads?
Nice. Love it. I mean, we're talking in extreme hypotheticals now. We're talking in anarchy, utopia, which I'm totally all for giving a shot. Is there a country currently or is there any? I know you mentioned Ireland before. Is there any other systems where they've implemented this and it's worked out, or anybody that's doing it now that your ideal place to live?
The only example that I know of in history is the Ireland model from that 1,000 to 9,000 years, and by all accounts, it was very successful. As far as today, no, of course not. I mean, today we live.
Do you know why Ireland stopped doing that?
Because they were overtaken by the Brits.
Okay.
I mean, they were stopped by force.
Not a historian. Yeah.
Right. So
well, I mean, to interject again, that could go toward my previous question. What is? It didn't work because they were easily overthrown because a tiny anarchy military wasn't able to stop them. Neither was that one.
Right. Because they were very warlord-like. I mean, there were various battles between the Irish warlords themselves and their, tiny villages. And I mean, it wasn't a perfect example of anarchism, but it was a successful example. Could anarchism be better? Absolutely. No question about it. But is there an anarchist society today, or even a libertarian society today? Hell no.
Right.
And that's
to
why
push back a little bit. You say it was a success, but a lot of people would say, it was an anarchist society and they got overthrown. How can you call it a success? Because that's a big issue. How does that work? How could they possibly?
That's a fair question. I mean, that's a very fair question. Sheer numbers, basically. I mean, back then you didn't have technology. You didn't have, modern conveniences, modern, weapons of war and things like that to be able to stop a larger force with a smaller force. And frankly, they were just overrun by sheer numbers and by sheer, more technology by the British. And unfortunately, that's something that an anarchist society today could potentially face. I mean, we could face, let's say that there was an anarchist enclave in the United States and Trump decided to send, nuclear weapons at them. If we don't have a way to stop nuclear weapons, then we're kind of fucked. That's just, that's all there is to it. So it's certainly a possibility. But look at what's happening in our wars today. We've got America bombing Yemen and Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and all these fucking. I mean, it's happening today. So what's the difference? At least we would have a chance to make our own destiny, a chance to live for ourselves and rule ourselves. And frankly, that's a chance that I think is worth taking.
Sure. So to go back to the initial question, is there a current place that you think would be better to live in than America at this point?
Man, that's a great question. If I had to pick, if I could pick anywhere in the world to live right now, it would be New Hampshire. because, okay, so there are 3 projects. Well, there's a few projects going on right now to really give us an autonomous.
Is this a sales pitch, or is it?
It kind of is, but I'm also really talking about
Sure.
several different other projects. So there's
Sure.
several different projects like the Free State Project that I'm involved in. I'm actually on the board of the Free State Project. There's the Free Societies, freesocieties.org or .com. It's Rodger Veer, who's Bitcoin Jesus. It's his project that he's actually trying to get a bunch of Bitcoin millionaires together, and they already have like $100 million promised to be able to buy a plot of land from a country and create a libertarian, anarchist country out of it. There's also seasteading is another, project that's going on. You've got what's his name? What are they doing with the piece of land outside of Croatia, Liberland? So you've got several of these types of things happening. I'm a part of the Free State Project right now because I believe right now that it's got the most promise in giving us that kind of society we want.
Are you talking about like getting islands or making like floating cities?
Well, so seasteading would be basically making floating cities so that you could, basically be a part of whatever city you want to be. I mean, this week I want to be a part of, seasteading site A, but, somebody there pisses me off. So I'm going to hop over to seasteading site B with my little boat and live there for a while. So seasteading is very promising as well. There's actually a book on seasteading. I can't think of the name of it, but there's Seasteading Institute online. Fantastic information. But right now, in my opinion, Free State Project is still the most promising. However, I am really watching seasteading closely, and I'm watching Rodger Veer's Free Society very closely because I think that in a few years, if those become promising, they could far surpass what we're doing here in New Hampshire. So I'm keeping my options open. If Free Society kicks off and they've got their own plot of land and they're living in a libertarian society, my family's gone. That simple.
Sure.
That's how important liberty is for me.
Sure. Yeah. That's awesome. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but with the seasteading idea, how does that work exactly?
So they actually have a timeline, and their first seasteads will be just very shortly off of the coast. I mean, very close to the coast still. So there's learning and whatnot, and then they slowly move out further and further away from the coast until they're in international waters. And if you read the seasteading book, and God, I wish I could remember the name of it, it was a fabulous book. It talks about the technology and the healthcare and the food systems and all of these things that we already have the technology for. These things are already happening on a regular basis that would make seasteading extremely successful very fast. And all of these brilliant minds behind these things, like food production in the ocean and technologies and all this, they're all coming together behind this project. And it's brilliant. We actually have a New England Seasteaders group here in the New Hampshire area that really dives into this stuff. And I think that one of the first seasteads could be off the coast of New Hampshire, and I'd love to see it.
Sure. I mean, great idea, and I love the idea of it, but does it seem at all far-fetched to you to be like, well, all the land has been taken over, we're going to make new land in this, in the ocean, which hasn't been overruled by man? Do you think that it is really feasible?
Sure. People do it all the time. I mean, there are man-made islands all over the world right now that people are living on. And those are static islands. I mean, these would be floating structures that would have the ability to move to any spot on the globe that they wanted to. The technology is absolutely there. The problem right now is putting all of the pieces together and, of course, the significant cost. You're talking a very significant cost. But some of the most brilliant minds in the world are behind some of this stuff. And, these guys know that it's possible. They're smarter than I am. So I'm going to trust them.
Awesome. Now, in this hypothetical, we're really getting deep here. If they can float all over the world in whatever place that they want, who decides that? Do they have like a local government for their man-made island?
So most organizations like that would have some form of a constitution. And I mentioned Free Societies earlier. They would have a simple constitution that basically lays out, don't murder, don't steal, don't hurt each other. Right. It would lay out some principles that would have to be followed. So yes, you would have to have some sort of a constitution. But the difference is, to become a part of that seastead, I have to voluntarily agree to that constitution. I have to sign a contract. Instead of this social contract bullshit, I did an episode of the Lava Flow.
Born into a social contract?
Right. I did an episode of the Lava Flow called I Didn't Sign It, because I didn't sign this social contract. It is, the first things about a contract is it has to be clear and it has to be signed by both parties. I didn't sign shit. Right. So this social contract nonsense, I actually had to argue me yesterday with some jackass on my Lava Flow page talking about, oh, well, you were born here and you have certain responsibilities. No, fuck you, I don't. I didn't sign any bullshit saying that I had any responsibilities, and my mother can't sign it for me, because just like my mother can't go into a contract for me to buy a house in my name without my signature, she can't sign a social contract for me either. Neither can her mother, and neither can George Washington. None of them can sign the document for me, period. End of story.
Sure. So that, of course, begs or asks the question, if we're thinking really short term here. Obviously, people will be born onto these islands and they will hopefully have grandchildren there. At what point is it exactly the same, where these kids didn't agree to it?
And that's a fantastic question. So, at that point, you're talking things like age of consent, age of reason, and every country or every seastead or whatever the case may be would have different rules for that. I'm of the belief, I treat my kids like they're adults, but they're tiny. Sure. Because they are. They are autonomous human beings. My oldest is 11, my youngest is 9. And, we do radical unschooling and peaceful parenting in this home. And they basically, they dictate what they do as long as it's not harming someone else or costing, someone else money. They have their own jobs and they take care of themselves. So every country, so they have, so we have monthly, what we call free markets here in New Hampshire.
They post the podcast. They're your producers, right?
Right. Now, I'm actually trying to get my oldest son into some voice acting right now. But no, they do. So they have chickens. So they sell their eggs. They paid for all the chickens themselves. They do monthly markets where they sell hot dogs and corn dogs and chili dogs and popcorn and all these kind of things. And they pay for all the equipment themselves. The things that they bought themselves, like their Xbox, their TV, these are things that they own because they bought it with their own money from their own market. So I can't dictate to them what they do with those things. If they want to smash their Xbox into a million pieces, who am I to say? But I'm not going to buy them a replacement. They're going to have to pay for it themselves. But going back to that, every country would say, okay, maybe the age of reason is 11, or maybe there's some sort of a test that a child takes so he gets past the age of reason, or whatever. It could be any number of things. And then they have the autonomy to decide for themselves.
Okay, so I have a lot of topics here, but I want to keep going down this rabbit hole. So as far as parenting, is there any cutoff to what you won't allow them to do? Just anything outside of what might harm you because it's your responsibility to protect them? Or are they allowed to, let's say, go super anarchist? Do you allow your children to drink or smoke weed or buy weed with their own money?
Well, so, it's funny. At PorcFest last year, my youngest son comes up to me. So at PorcFest was the big party Saturday night, which is always the big party. And my son walks up to me at the picnic tables and he says, "Hey, I just bought these cookies 3 for $1 from this dude over here." Oh, right. Wait, show me which dude you bought these cookies from. Right. And because I knew that there was a guy over there selling pot cookies, but his younger son was also selling regular cookies. Now, of course, some dude is not going to sell my 9-year-old kid pot cookies. He's just not going to fucking do it. And especially when my kid told me they were 3 for $1, I knew they weren't pot cookies. but so, technically, if my 11-year-old wanted to have a sip of alcohol, and I would be lying if I said that my child had not tasted a sip of Crown and Coke a time or two, because it's happened. I know that it's happened. I don't want to incriminate myself.
It's happened. We'll just say it's happened.
It's happened.
Somebody gave it to him. Right. Some guy with a beard.
Right. And as long as that's happening to where, I have some say about it at this point, because, my kids don't have a car. They can't go trolling the streets and they can't go, hanging out with their buddies and getting drunk until they, buy their car. So I do have some
But should control. They be able to?
Well, unfortunately, the laws don't allow for that. I think that if I felt that my 11-year-old could safely, because I have a duty to protect my child. So if my child were going to run out in front of a car, I would initiate violence against him, and I would snatch his ass up and even break his arm if I had to pull him out from in front of that car. Now, have I initiated violence against my son? Absolutely, I have. But at the same time, he could seek restitution from me if he so chose. I don't think he would, because I just saved his life. But He could certainly do that. Now, that restitution is on me anyway because I've got to pay to fix his harm. So, there you go.
Right. Hey, Dan Smots here. I'm taking a second to interrupt myself talking to talk about myself because, I don't get paid a penny for the hours and hours that I put into creating this show for you guys in your greedy little ears, and I've got a family to feed. To make that happen, I run my own media business called Goulash Media. If you have a need in anything from video production to graphic design to audio production and beyond, you can get it all for a painfully fair price at Goulash Media. In video, I do weddings, music videos, commercials, pageants, plays, etc., etc., etc. For design, I do photo editing, album art, logos, branding, business cards, merchandise, you name it. For audio, I do engineering, production, editing, jingles, and, well, podcasts. So if you've got a media need of any kind, or if you'd just like to give a little something back and help keep my children fed, check out all the endless options at my website, goulashmedia.net. That's goulash, Goulash, media.net, where we cater to the little guy with the big vision. Okay. Oh, man, I could keep digging deep into hypotheticals for hours. And
I love hypotheticals. And see, that's the thing is, these hypotheticals.
Most people hate them.
Well, nobody asks these questions of the government. Nobody says, well, why doesn't the government do this better? How could the government do that better? But when it comes to an anarchist solution, everybody always asks those kind of questions. What about the roads? What about this?
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that I have every answer to what would go on in an anarchist society. I don't.
Let's try it, though.
Well, absolutely. I've put enough thought into this that I have some answers to some of these questions.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, I'm one person out of billions of people on this planet. Billions of people have better ideas than I do and can implement these things in a free market society. Some of them work, some of them won't. But I guarantee you most of those ideas will be far superior than what I've outlaid here.
Absolutely. So let's go off of hypotheticals and talk about like current real world, what is happening now, solutions to, I'm guessing that people that are interested in this they probably signed out a long time ago. But for anybody that's stuck around, like, what are your thoughts on where we are and what we should be doing to move in that direction?
Well, secession is a big thing. The Declaration of Independence gives us the right. If our government no longer is doing what we want it to do, then we have the right to alter, abolish it. Period. End of story. And I think that seceding in states is the first step, and then seceding in communities is the next step, and then seceding individually is the next step. We are all sovereign, every single one of us. And I don't mean a sovereign country, a sovereign state. I mean sovereign individuals. The largest minority, let me rephrase this. The smallest minority is the individual, period. And if you're not protecting the individual rights, then you're not protecting any rights.
So I'm going to throw you some topics that I have down here, and you tell me what we should do about these individual things to bring us to a more anarcho-capitalist, more free market, more anarchy society, where you are right now, personally. The police, what do we do?
Well, and again, that would go back to insurance companies. Insurance companies would have a desire to protect our property and our persons, because that would have insurance to pay that company to do so. But even taking aside insurance companies, I desire security. So I would pay for security if somebody else wasn't going to provide it for me. I don't want somebody robbing my home. I don't want somebody, destroying my property. I don't want somebody stealing my property. So I'm going to pay for security services. I'm paying for it now. I would pay for it then. It's just right now it's being stolen from me. And so much of that money is being wasted on bureaucrats and pissed away and stolen and lost. I would have so much more of that money to spend on those kind of services in an anarchist society.
Schools.
Get your kids out of government indoctrination centers. Damn it, that is the number one step to liberty right there. Get your kids out of government indoctrination centers. If you're sending your kid to school 8 hours a fucking day, some preacher, I can't remember his name, he said, you send your kids to the Romans 8 hours a day, and then you're surprised when they come home Romans. Because you're sending them to government schools every day. You wonder why they come home saying the Pledge of Allegiance and saying cops are good and saying government is awesome and blah, rah, rah, rah. Yeah, USA. Bullshit. Bullshit. Get your kids out of government indoctrination centers. That's the number one step to liberty. And once we have a whole generation of kids who are primarily homeschooled, then you have dissolved that illusion of the most dangerous superstition. That's why my kids have never stepped one foot in government indoctrination centers, and they never will. Mark Clear, actually, or one of the guys, asked me if my kids asked to go to government indoctrination centers, what would they say? What would I say? And I said, simply, I would sit them down, I would have a conversation with them, and I would say, "F you in the neck." I am not sending my kids to a government indoctrination center. When they are living on their own, if they want to do that, they want to drive themselves to a fucking government school, fine, but I'm not doing it.
Sure. 2 follow-up questions to that. I've said multiple times, do you find the Pledge of Allegiance to be a creepy thing? What's your take on the whole, you have to say this, you have to know this is part of our education?
It's religion. Pure and simple. It is an absolutely, you have the religious iconography with the flag. You've got the religious mantra, the religious saying, instead of, being on your knees or whatever, you're holding your hand to your heart, or as the Bellamy salute was, you do the Hitler salute. That's how it started. I mean, look, it started off as from a socialist progressive who was trying to sell flags. That's who started the Pledge of Allegiance, a socialist progressive. Is that the kind of message we want to be giving to our kids, that the state is supreme? Bullshit. That we pledge allegiance to this state, to this piece of cloth?
To anything, let alone the freaking government.
Right. I don't pledge allegiance to anything or anybody except for myself and my wife. I mean, I did pledge allegiance to her by, saying my vows.
And by signing the government document.
And that's another thing, is that if government ever got out of marriage in New Hampshire, I would divorce my wife immediately, and I've already told her this. I would divorce her immediately, and I would have a non-government government marriage with her. Because I don't want the government involved in our relationship. I don't want the government involved in. I mean, let's think about this. When you go take a piss, look on the toilet. It says 3 liters per flush because or 3.8 liters per flush because the government mandates it. The government is even responsible for every time you take a piss. This is ridiculous, people. It's ridiculous.
Beautiful. My second follow-up question to your schooling your schooling answer was, what do you do with your kids? Are you guys strict homeschoolers, or do you have them in like some sort of private school or anything?
We are strict homeschoolers. We do unschooling, which is a very radical form of homeschooling. Basically, our children dictate what and when they want to learn, which means that my kids mostly learn from video games and YouTube. And then when they have questions, they come ask us, and we go through the rabbit hole of learning these things. It is the most effective way. I mean, my oldest son taught himself how to learn at 4.5, 5 years old because he wanted to learn what his video game said. Pure and simple. He wanted to learn what he was supposed to do in Minecraft. I wasn't going to tell him. So he learned how to read. He taught himself how to read from video games because he wanted to play them.
Sure.
Children are supposed to be children. We are putting our children under such a burden, under such a strain, under such stress that they are shooting people up in their schools. They are on so many goddamn drugs because we are putting them through this roller coaster. Kids are supposed to just have fun. And they will learn things along the way. I mean, you eat dirt once, you learn, hey, that's not a good idea. I'm not going to eat dirt again. I mean, you learn as you go through life. I'm not in school right now. I learn something new every single day of my life, and my kids are the same way.
Mm-hmm. Now, the next 3 questions that I had, you already raised in the last answer. So they are guns, drugs, and YouTube. YouTube being the whole censorship right now. We'll start with that. Do you think YouTube has the right to censor people?
Of course I do. I think it's disgusting. I think that they will eventually see their numbers dwindle away to nearly nothing because of it. But of course they've got the right. They pay for the servers. They pay for the bandwidth. They pay for they pay content producers, whatever. It's their platform. But I think they're foolish for doing so. You already see things coming up. You've got Vimeo. You've got DTube on Steam. You've got all of these different areas popping up to replace YouTube, and eventually one of them will get
BitChute. If you guys want to look at my replacement currently, where I'm moving all my videos to, it's bitchute.com.
Yep, and that's exactly right. And one of these will catch on, and it will be the next YouTube, and they will, not be censoring people because they see the value in that to their consumer base.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've said it many times in the forum when people have brought up the YouTube thing. I'm like, they're definitely censoring my stuff. They've blocked some of my stuff. They have, demonetized almost every video that I've posted. But I've also said, I think that they have the right to do so. I mean, nobody disagrees with the fact that does Google, Gmail, YouTube, all of that, do they have the right to, take their services away? Do they have the right to shut down their company tomorrow? Yes, they do. So they obviously have the right to run it how they want. So
well, and it's no different than if I had a storefront and I didn't want some guy walking in with his dick hanging out in my store, I would kick him out of my store. It's no different. Am I censoring his ability to walk around with his dick hanging out? Of course I am. But I've got a good reason for doing so. Come on.
That's sexist, man. That's sexist.
Well, if I didn't want tits hanging out, whatever the case may be,
I was going to ask you at the beginning of the episode, but I think we're pretty well past that by now. I was going to ask you if you could record this episode without cursing at all. Because I do edit to make it something that people can listen to around their kids. You're giving me a hell of a job, but it's fine. I love it. I want it to be more real.
so I do a clean podcast, Resist the Empire, a libertarian view of the Star Wars universe, and I do that one clean. And let me tell you, it is the hardest thing that I do every week. It is so difficult because I get on these rants, and it's like, that's just me. And when I first started the Lava Flow, I thought, I'm going to try to do it clean. And there's no way, because number one, it's not real. It's not who I am. And number two, it just would make it so much more difficult. And
right.
I'm not going to put myself through that. So I'm sorry I'm putting you through it.
No, it's fine. I allow people to say whatever they want. I just do very minor edits. I still let it be very obvious what the person was saying, because I think it's important to know what word they used. But it's all good.
Did you release a non-edited version too?
This might be the first one, but
I was gonna say, because I know a lot of podcasts like This American Life, for example, they release 2 copies. So if they've got one that has cuss words, they release the one with cuss words, and they release a bleep version as well for those who want to listen with their families. So.
Sure. So my other 2 questions for currently, like, what is the procedure to take? What is the best thing that people can do in non-utopia, non-hypothetical side as far as guns and drugs?
So, many states are already working on marijuana, but I think that is wholly inadequate, and it's basically a slap in the face to the whole idea of stopping the drug war. Marijuana is probably the most used drug. So I'm glad that, that there are people who smoke marijuana who are no longer being abused and accosted and kidnapped and even killed for smoking a joint. But it's got to be just a first step. We've got to see things like that's happening in, oh my God, my mind just went blank of the country. We've got a couple of countries now that have completely opened up drug use in their country and made it not illegal. The worst that can happen to you is that you go through some sort of a drug rehab program if you're busted high and doing.
Is that Sweden?
No, it's not Sweden. Gosh,
oh, good. Never mind.
Oh, Portugal. Portugal is one of them, and they've completely legitimized or legalized all of their drugs, or delegalized. So they're no longer illegal, but they're not really legal either. So they do have some recourse, and I think that that's where we need to go, because as long as you are doing something that is not harming another human being, I don't care what it is. I don't care if you off in your closet with a noose around your neck, like what's his name that killed himself doing it.
Robin
You're not hurting
Williams?
anyone. No, well, oh yeah, but no, the karate guy back in the grasshopper, anyway. So as long as you're not doing anything to harm anybody else, nobody has any right to say that what you're doing is a bad thing or should be illegal. I could shoot up all day, every day, and as long as I'm not hurting anybody else, what's the difference? And I'm also against drunk driving laws for the same reason. Sure. That I think at that point, until you have actually harmed somebody or harmed their property, there's no victim. No victim, no crime.
Preach. So would you apply that again to your children? Would you say, yeah, smoke meth until you get to a point where you're addicted to it and are going to harm yourself?
Well, so as long as my kids are buying it on their own and I'm not having to deal with the repercussions of it, I mean, who am I to say otherwise?
With those lemonade stands, they've got to really want it to get to that point.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess meth is cheap. I've never bought meth, so I have no clue.
I have no idea.
No clue whatsoever. But honestly, the best that I can do is present something that my kids would want to emulate. I present, to them, this is the best way to live your life so that you have a long, healthy, productive life. And if they choose to do things that harm themselves, as long as I'm responsible for the medical bills as a result of it, or whatever the case may be, then I do have some say-so in that. But as soon as I don't, then it's not my issue anymore at that point.
Sure. So what do you say about parents that don't care? Parents that are on meth on their own and they don't pay attention to their kids or what they're doing?
I think that in a free market society, there would be courts that would invalidate their parental rights, and that I think that people would be able to go in and rescue those children, because at that point those children are being harmed, they're being abused, whether it's physically, whether it's they're not being fed properly, whatever the case may be. I think that those children are being abused, and I think that as human beings and as private court systems or private police or even just individual citizens, you have not only a right but a duty to do something about that. And I don't mean duty as in it's your responsibility, you have to do something. But I think that if you're watching something like that happen and you're not doing something, you're kind of a shitty human being.
Sure. But how does that work? I mean, we know they are. I said that in the question.
And the problem now is that government basically protects that. I mean, government wants to keep children with families as much as humanly possible,
right.
Even families that are horribly dysfunctional and actually.
My wife and I help at a foster camp. Camp for abused and neglected foster kids. I know that, and we've gone through the foster course and all that. We know for a fact that these parents are awful, and we know for a fact that they shouldn't have their kids. We actually started doing the actual foster care course, like trying to adopt one of the kids that we met there, because we knew that there was not a good future for him, and we loved him and thought he was an awesome individual. So what happens to those children though in an anarchist society if they're taken away from their parents?
Yeah, and again, I don't have all the answers.
Sure.
And that's the thing, is that anarchy would be trial and error, just like our government is. Let's be honest. But I think that there would be people like you who actually give a shit, and they would actually do something. They would actively do something to make this happen. Right now you would have no legal, you would have no recourse to do anything other than offer some advice. In an anarchist society, it may be possible that you have the legal backing to actually remove that child from an abusive system, from an abusive institution. I honestly don't know the answer to that, because that's one that really speaks to me as well, because, I've seen abused children, and, there's nothing in the world that means more to me than my children. If I saw my children being harmed, I would do whatever it took to stop that. So I feel your pain, and I have nothing but love and respect for what you do for those kids.
Sure.
And I honestly just don't have all the answers.
No, totally. I mean, huge topic, and I don't expect you to have all the answers, and being willing to say that is awesome. The other one in that, like 15 minutes ago when we were having the initial discussion, was guns. Realistically now, like, what do you think is the right course of action for guns? With all the school shootings, with all the nonsense that's going on, like, what's your initial course of action? My initial course of action is immediately get rid of gun-free zones. And I'm talking government institutions. Now, we're talking about in our current society. You notice that the Aurora, Colorado shooter, for example, passed 2 theaters before he stopped at the theater that he stopped at to start shooting people up, because those 2 theaters didn't have anti-gun policies. He knew that he was going to a theater that would allow him unfettered access with his weapons without any recourse from anybody on site. Mm-hmm. And look at school. Why are we having these situations at schools over and over and over again? Because people know that they can go in there with a gun and expect no resistance whatsoever. Immediately, I would get rid of gun-free zones. That's number one. Number two, I would never mandate that the teacher be armed. I think that is ridiculous. I just saw an article when I was flipping through Facebook earlier today of some school teacher who shot herself in the fucking leg at school because she went to the bathroom with her gun on her and she fucking shot herself. Some people just don't need a fucking gun. I mean, it's that simple. Some people are too stupid or too crazy or whatever the case may be. I'm not going to mandate that anybody carry a weapon, but I would absolutely allow teachers who feel comfortable doing that
I would absolutely allow teachers to carry weapons. I mean, look at Israel. You haven't had a school shooting in Israel in decades because they walk around, their teachers walk around armed. Hell, some of their students walk around armed, for Christ's sake. So, I mean, yeah, I would absolutely allow that to happen. But
would you take to that extreme of the kids having guns too?
I think that if they bought the gun themselves and they have the wherewithal to use so and they're comfortable doing so.
How do you determine if they have the wherewithal to do so?
They determine it themselves, and if they are any sort of a threat, then they're banned from the school. They're banished from the school if they present any sort of issue that they look like they have no competence with their weapon, or they whatever the case may be. Then either you ban them or you ban their weapon on a case by case basis. But I think
I was bullied a lot in high school, so what is the point where you determine that they don't have the wherewithal to use a gun? Because does that mean me personally being shot by a bully, or does that mean that they have to take a course or something?
I certainly think that it means being able to protect yourself from bullies. I mean, I have, I don't know if you listened to the Lions of Liberty episode today that came out or not, but I actually used my weapon to protect the life of myself and a girl that I was engaged to at the time.
Sure.
And I don't think that, I was probably 24 at the time. What's the difference between me and a 14-year-old? Other than age. I mean, should a 14-year-old not have the same right to be able to defend their life and property as anybody else? Absolutely, they should.
But did you have to go through a course that said that you're fit to do that?
Well, I did have my concealed carry permit at the time, so to have that permit, I did have to go through a state-mandated course, again, a government course, but I don't feel that that's absolutely necessary. No, I think that, if let's say that a private school wanted to allow their students to have guns on campus, then I'm sure that school would mandate some sort of, whether it be training or competency test or something like that. And I think that, it may get to the point where if you go to Walmart may not let you on their property unless you can prove that you've had some sort of competency test. I mean, look, we have appliances every day. I mean, I've got several right here that have EL ratings on them, or whatever the case may be. What is it? Electric? Anyway, that rating for electric devices. Well, I mean, who's to say that I can't have an ID that has my ratings on it? Hey, I'm rated with a fucking, AK-47, or I'm rated with a fucking 10 megaton nuke, or whatever the case may be. I'm rated for these weapons, and then Walmart's going to let me in with them because I'm rated and certified by a private body that says that, hey, this guy knows what he's doing.
Sure.
And you could also have that at schools as well.
Nice. Okay. Well, you brought up the Aurora shooting. I don't want to get into too sidetracked, but what is your take on like conspiracy theorists, conspiracies, and all that stuff? I know that you have certain opinions on certain ones where you get very angry about, but just them in general, like 9/11, all that stuff. Do you believe that our government is capable of, carrying out these acts?
Our government cannot even distribute mail at a profit. Do you really think that they can pull off 9/11? I mean, come on. They are the most incompetent organization that has ever existed in the fucking world, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Lysander Spooner, a single man, put together a company in the 1800s to compete with American Mail Service and was smoking their ass at half the cost and even a quarter of the cost and a tenth of the cost, was smoking their ass to the point where the American Postal Service had to drop their rates to nothing, and he was still smoking their ass. And then they finally had to outlaw additional first-class postage. I mean, that's how incompetent our government is. And yet we think that they can pull off these huge, elaborate conspiracy theories. I don't buy it. But even if they do, let's just say that they do. And I do believe in some conspiracies. I fully believe that TWA Flight 800 was shot out of the sky by a Navy missile. I will believe that to my dying day. So I do believe in some conspiracies. But I think that, when you have those conversations with the muggles, the average human being out there, that immediately turns them off. And that's why I kind of eschew those conversations, because it's not productive. It doesn't help the situations. I absolutely believe in some of these conspiracies. I absolutely believe that we don't know everything about 9/11, and we never will. I don't believe our government is involved by any stretch of imagination, but I believe that our government knows more about what happened than we do, clearly. But
so things like Waco, that type of thing. Do you think that is a conspiracy, or do you think that
Waco wasn't a conspiracy? It was wide open in your face. The government sent fucking tanks in and fucking murdered dozens of people. There's no conspiracy there. It was on the TV. We all saw it, all the time. I mean, it's things that, they were so incompetent that they couldn't cover that shit up. I'm sure you've seen the documentaries about Waco, Revelation, and I can't think of the name of them.
Rules of Engagement.
Yeah, Rules of Engagement. Oh my God, what an incredible document! One of the best documentaries I've ever seen. It is clear that the government was so incompetent in that situation. Now, am I saying that they went in and they killed those people on purpose? I don't know that. I can't say that I know the mentality of the people that were driving those tanks. Looking at the configuration of those tanks, they were clearly there to spray CS gas in there. Now, clearly, some of the bodies that were killed with gunfire. And I think that some of those people are trying to escape and they were shot by government agents. I absolutely believe that. But again, if we lead off with, oh my God, the government wanted to kill these people and this and that, that shuts the conversation down for 90% of muggles. They just don't care at that point. But if you start the conversation off with, look at this atrocity, Ruby Ridge, Waco, look at these things that the government...
How about USS Liberty? Do you know about that?
USS Liberty, was that the...
the ship that LBJ, he was in office, and they were... This is totally off script, so I might be totally off base, but I've done an episode on it. Basically, they said that they were being bombed by these foreign entities, and LBJ, when we scrambled fighters to go out and rescue this one fighter ship, he called them back. He said, don't, we need that ship to the bottom, or whatever. That might be an Alex Jones quote, so I'm not speaking perfectly. But anyway, the basic idea was there was a ship that was almost entirely unarmed, that was being bombed by planes that are speculated as being sent out by us to involve us in another war.
So there are clearly examples of U.S. shenanigans in starting wars. I fully believe that FDR, or at least many people high up in his administration, knew that Pearl Harbor was going to happen. There's tons of evidence that points to that. And I believe that they allowed it to happen because they wanted a full-scale war, because, let's be honest, war is profitable for a lot of people. Now, for the average person like you and me, war sucks. It's not profitable. It kills us left and right. But for the money makers, war is profitable. So I fully believe that the government has been involved in many situations that they have either allowed or even pushed for wars to happen. But again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, because most of these things are fact now. We know this. We have evidence of these things. These aren't conspiracies anymore because they're facts.
But why are they facts? Just because the documents have been released? What does it take to for you to think that 9/11 or the Oklahoma City bombing was actually conspired? Because does it take the bad guys coming out with their hands up and saying, "Hey, we did it"? No. If you think that they're corrupt.
So look, another reason I have so many issues with conspiracy theories is that we have so many things. We have so much evidence of so much bullshit every single day that the government's doing, from cops killing people. I saw a video today of an attorney walking through a metal detector at a courthouse, and 6 fucking thug officers jumping his ass because he mouthed off to one of them, and they beat the shit out of him and fractured his fucking shoulder. These are the kind of things that we see on a daily basis. We know they're happening. We see them happening, but people are so wrapped up in these fucking conspiracy theories. Fuck the conspiracy theories. Let's focus on the things that are happening every day, that we see in front of us, that we know are happening, that we have evidence of. That's what we focus on. And then once all that shit's cleared up, then let's talk about these possibilities, these conspiracies that may or may not be out there. But until we fix the problems that are happening to us on a daily basis, those conspiracies are a moot point.
Okay.
Now, they're fun to talk about, though. I'm certainly not one to say they're not fun to talk about, because they are. I've had many conversations about TWA 800, and that's an old school. That goes back to when I was young. That's an old school conspiracy. Matter of fact, I did my senior English thesis, and when I was a senior in high school at Advanced English, on the JFK assassination, and I was fully convinced that when I did my thesis, that I figured out who killed JFK. So I am an old school conspiracy theorist, but I've learned in my wisdom, my age, whatever you want to call it, I'm old now, that it really shuts down that conversation. So
sure. Yeah. We can get into that more later. Before we do, I want to do bonus content with you. Maybe we'll talk more about conspiracies, but I definitely want to talk about what somebody brought up. David White brought up in the Lions of Liberty group, and he also talked about he's a supporter of Lions of Liberty. He's a supporter of my show too. He brought up Rogue One. Sorry, guys, we're going to talk about it again. We've got a hardcore Star Wars guy here, possibly even more hardcore than me, even though he doesn't have any tattoos of Star Wars. But before we get to that, Rodger, are you optimistic of the future, or do you see any turn in events that could lead to the hypotheticals that we've been talking about?
When you talk hypotheticals, you mean hypotheticals that moving to anarchism?
Right. Yeah, like hypotheticals moving to the utopia that we've been discussing.
Yeah, I do. There's, Catalonia, for example, with their whole referendum. And, we saw on a full display what violent, aggressive government can do. And those things happen all the time. And as we see more and more of that, people will start waking up. Every time a government sends jackbooted thugs on camera to disenfranchise people, to stop them from voting, or to just beat the shit out of them for no reason, more and more people will say, why the fuck do we need government? So as long as they keep that up, we've got secession movements everywhere from California to Texas to New Hampshire these days. And eventually one of those is going to catch fire, and it's going to happen. And again, I talked about, once the states secede, then the counties and the towns, and then the individual. So yes, I fully believe, the mantra of the Free State Project is liberty in our lifetimes, not in my kids' lifetimes, in my lifetime. And that's what I'm working for, is liberty in my lifetime.
So is the solution in voting, or is it in activism?
Voting does nothing but legitimize the system. You are basically feeding the dragon. You are asking for permission to have freedom. Who is going to give you permission to have freedom? No government is going to give you permission to stop paying taxes or to protect your life wherever you go, or whatever the case may be. Nobody's going to give you that permission. You've got to take that permission. You've got to ignore the beast, ignore the dragon, stop feeding it, and move on with your life. That's one of the reasons I'm here in New Hampshire, is because I have so much less government encroachment in my life. Now, New Hampshire's not perfect by any means, no question, but it's the most free country in the United States, according to the Freedom in the 50 States, and by a long shot. And that's freedominthe50states.com, I think, is the website. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm here, is because I have more freedom. I've already moved to more freedom, and I'll keep moving until I get to that immediate, that perpetual full freedom. I'll do whatever it takes, because I believe that liberty in my lifetime is a goal worth achieving, especially for my children. I want my children's generation to be the first generation that has true freedom in the entire fucking world, because we've never had it. And I'm hoping that my children will be that first generation.
Absolutely.
That's why I fight the good fight.
Love it. And honestly, I feel like most people don't even realize what the definition of liberty is. We just think it's, American society, we're the freest country and everything. We have the Statue of Liberty, but
well, and that was me for a long time. We talked about that earlier. When I was growing up in a conservative household, I thought that I was fighting for liberty, but I was fighting for my liberty, not for the liberty of other people to do. I thought that drug dealers were bad. I thought that gay marriage was wrong. I thought that border jumpers were criminals and that they should go to jail. These are people who want to freely move. They're not hurting anybody. Mm-hmm. But I thought that they were bad. I didn't know what fucking freedom was. And that's sadly what most Americans' idea of freedom is: freedom for them and not for, freedom for me, but not for you. That, freedom is an individual thing. Either you've got it and everybody else has it, or nobody has it. If everybody in your community doesn't have freedom, then you don't have freedom either.
Absolutely. Well, Rodger, give us a final closing, and then we'll do some plugs after.
Dan, thanks so much for having me on the show. Again, I have got to get your show in my feed, because, like I said, if Mark Clear says it's a good show, I've got to check it out. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, quickly before we wrap, tell us about PorkFest.
PorkFest is anarchist heaven in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And it's, there's not just anarchist. It'll probably be a little bit majority anarchist, but there's a lot of anarchists there too. It's all libertarian. It's the biggest libertarian event in the country, and you don't want to miss it. My wife and I are co-producing this year for the first time, and we are putting on a hell of a show. We're bringing Backwards, which is Eric July's band. Mm-hmm. They're going to do a hardcore show on a concert on Saturday night. We've got Eric July going to be speaking. We've got Ben Swan going to be speaking. We've got so many amazing speakers that we haven't announced yet that I really don't want to talk about yet because we haven't announced them, and I might get in trouble. Don't want to get in trouble. Sure. But I mean, it is literally an anarchist paradise or libertarian paradise for a week, from Tuesday through Sunday, June 19th through the 24th. In one of the most beautiful places in the world, in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. I mean, literally everywhere you look in this campground, you're just surrounded by these gorgeous mountains. You've got speakers, you've got events, you've got adult day camp, you've got stuff for the kids. I mean, they have a whole porcupine. They call it porcupines because we call ourselves porcupines. Mm-hmm. The porcupines program is for the kids. You know, my kids told me 2 years ago with the first pork fest that we went to that it was the most fun they ever had. It was even better than Disney World. And I spent $7,000 on Disney World. So I wish they had told me that a long time ago. But because, you know, they get this freedom that they don't, that they normally don't have, you know, because they can just run around the whole campground and do whatever they want. I mean, they can run around my yard and my house, but once they go on the government street, then the government's got to say on what they do. Well, they don't have any say at Rodger's Campground. So check us out at porkfest.com.
Absolutely. Now, give us plugs for everything else you got going on, all of your millions of podcasts and whatever else you want people to check out.
Yeah, Pax Libertas Productions is the production company that I run. Oh, thank you. My wife just brought me some more whiskey. Thanks, babe.
Oh, man, lucky.
So, she's the best woman in the world. Holy cow. So we've got 6 podcasts on the Pax Libertas Productions network. The Lava Flow, Libertarian, Anarchist, Voluntarist, Agorist podcast is my flagship podcast. We've got the Essential Libertarianism that I talked about, Anarcho-Christian, which is an evaluation of the Christian in the state, basically anarchy and Christianity. We've got One Free Family, which we talked about peaceful parenting and radical unschooling. A couple that I know here do this podcast for me, and they are amazing parents. I try to emulate what they do on a daily basis. That's onefreefamily.com. ANCAP Barbershop, which is a couple of awesome dudes, hilarious dudes down in Alabama that I know that do that one. He's actually an ANCAP barber. He actually cuts hair for a living on the side.
Nice.
So yeah, those are the podcasts that we do. Check it out at paxlibertas.com.
Awesome. Well, Rodger, thanks so much for coming on. Maybe we'll do 2 bonus episodes because I definitely want to bring up your pastoral ship and your story behind that. So maybe we'll do 2. And if you guys want to get those episodes, you'll have to go to tsidpod.com/support and sign up for the Downers Club. But before we get to that, Rodger, thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy and a pleasure, and I would love to have you on again.
Cheers. I appreciate it.
Well, what'd you think? If these are foreign and new ideas for you, then I'm glad you had an open mind and stuck around to the end. Either that, or you just skipped ahead to the end to find out if you won the Last Jedi drawing, and if that's you and you're the winner, then I hope you feel a tremendous amount of guilt every time you watch this movie. I hope that it eats away at your dark and greedy soul and you're unable to live with yourself. I hope that your children grow up to be Star Wars-hating commie terrorists. But otherwise, a big thank you to all who signed up and keep helping spread the word of the show. If you didn't know about the contest, fear not, as I plan to do more of these giveaways in the future. The best way to stay up to date is by joining the System is Down forum on Facebook. That's where we have all these open, uncomfortable, and fun conversations. Rodger Paxton is also a member of the forum, so if you want to ask him questions about his crazy anarchy ideas, you can do so by going to tsidpod.com/forum and joining that for absolutely free. Another great way to not only stay up to date, but also support the show, keep the fun flowing, you get multiple bonus episodes of the show every single week by going to the Downers Club at tsidpod.com/support. As mentioned in the episode, Rodger and I will be releasing 2 bonus episode conversations. One of them is on his transition from Christian pastor to hardcore atheist. And another one, we debated the value of Star Wars Rogue One. So some fun conversations that you'll be getting this week if you are a member of the Downers Club. So again, for all the info on how you can be a good person, just go to tsidpod.com/support and join the Downers Club. And all the links to all this stuff is in the show description, so check that out. But you see what I did there? I snuck in my plugs just when you thought I was about to announce the winner that you've been waiting for. Because I know that once I tell you who won, you're going to bail, right? If it wasn't you, you're going to turn this off immediately. I know you. You're going to. So, now for the moment you've all been waiting for. The winner of Star Wars: The Last Jedi on DVD is probably someone who left us a happy review on iTunes and subscribed to the show so they don't miss a single episode and help boost our numbers, which is something very much appreciated that you can do as well. But more importantly, drum roll please, the winner of The System is Down, Star Wars: The Last Jedi DVD giveaway, who undoubtedly follows, likes, and shares the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and everywhere else in social media networks, and also tells people about the show and helps spread the value of uncomfortable discourse, and will not only tune into the show next Monday, but will tell more people about it and improve their quality of life by uncalculatable amounts, is William Wells. William, congratulations, and thank you so much for helping build the show. I hope you enjoy this little token of my gratitude that will be headed your way very, very soon. And to the rest of you, please take a note from William's book and go out and tell someone new about the show this week. Help us keep this going and growing and be as cool as Mary Rome, who just joined the Downers Club this week by going to tsidpod.com/support. Shout out, Mary. Thank you so much for your support. And to all of you beautiful, wonderful weirdos, if you'll have me, I'll be right back here in your ears first thing next Monday with some more uncomfortable conversations. Until then, question everything and stay uncomfortable. Thanks. This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.